Have you ever wondered what you would do if death gave you a second chance to save someone you love? What if that chance came too late, buried 6 feet under concrete and earth, suffocating in darkness while you stood above ground, oblivious? Nathan Harper never imagined he would face that question. But on a cold October morning in Portland, Oregon, as rain hammered against the chapel windows and the priest's voice droned through Emma's eulogy, Nathan did what he always did when reality became unbearable. He raised his camera and started filming. Through the viewfinder, everything felt manageable, distant, safe. The lens became a barrier between him and the impossible truth that his wife was lying in that polished mahogany coffin, pale and still, dressed in the blue sundress she wore on their honeymoon in Maui 12 years ago. Nathan had always hidden behind cameras. As a documentary filmmaker, he had spent 2 decades observing life through glass and metal, capturing other people's tragedies, triumphs, and transformations without ever having to fully participate in his own existence. Emma used to tease him about it. One day, she had said just 3 months ago, laughing as she pushed the lens away from her face during breakfast, "You're going to miss something important because you're too busy filming it." She had been right. He had missed everything. The signs, the symptoms, the moment her heart began to fail. Dr. Michael Grant had explained it with clinical precision at the hospital. Acute myocardial infarction caused by an undiagnosed congenital heart defect. Emma's heart had simply stopped while she was sleeping beside him. No warning, no goodbye. Just there one moment, gone the next. Nathan had woken up at dawn to find her cold. The memory of touching her arm, feeling that terrible stillness, shaking her shoulders while screaming her name. It played in his mind like corrupted footage, skipping and distorting, refusing to process into something his brain could accept. So he filmed. He filmed the paramedics arriving. He filmed them checking for a pulse they would never find. He filmed the hospital corridor where Dr. Grant delivered the news. He filmed the funeral home where he selected the coffin. He filmed the florist arranging white lilies. He filmed everything because if he stopped, if he lowered the camera even for a moment, the full weight of Emma's absence would crush him completely. Now standing in the chapel with 50 mourners behind him, Nathan zoomed in on Emma's face. She looked peaceful. That's what everyone kept saying. She looked so peaceful. But Nathan knew better. Peace was a lie people told themselves about death. There was nothing peaceful about a 36-year-old woman dying in her sleep, her dreams cut short, her future erased. Through the lens, he studied every detail of her face. The mortician had done impressive work. Emma's skin had been given a rosy tint that mimicked life. Her hair was arranged perfectly, cascading over her shoulders just the way she liked it. Her hands were folded across her chest, holding a single white rose. But her eyes were closed, and that bothered Nathan more than anything. Emma had the most expressive eyes he had ever seen, hazel green, always moving, always questioning, always alive with curiosity and mischief. Now they were sealed shut beneath expertly applied makeup, and he would never see them open again. The thought made his hand tremble. The camera shook slightly, and he steadied it, forcing himself to breathe. Father Timothy's voice filled the chapel, something about God's plan and eternal rest, but Nathan wasn't listening. He panned slowly across the flowers, the coffin's brass handles, back to Emma's face. He needed to capture everything. He needed proof that this had happened, that she had existed, that their 12 years together weren't just a dream he was about to wake up from. Sarah Chen, Emma's younger sister, sat in the front row, sobbing into her hands. She had begged Nathan to put the camera away. "This isn't a project," she had hissed at him before the service. "This is my sister's funeral. Show some respect." But Nathan couldn't explain it to her. The camera was the only thing keeping him sane. Without it, he would fall apart. He would scream. He would run. He would claw open that coffin and refuse to let them take her away. The camera gave him purpose. It gave him distance. It gave him control over a situation where he had none. As the service ended and pallbearers approached the coffin, Nathan kept filming. He filmed them closing the lid, sealing Emma away forever. He filmed the procession to the cemetery through rain-soaked streets. He filmed the graveside ceremony, the coffin being lowered into the earth, the first shovelfuls of dirt hitting the polished wood with sounds like drum beats. And when it was over, when everyone else had gone home to their living families and warm houses, Nathan stood alone in the rain, camera still running, recording the empty grave until the battery finally died. He didn't know it yet, but he had just captured something impossible. Something that would destroy what little remained of his sanity. and reveal a truth far more horrifying than death itself. The footage would haunt him, but not as much as what he would discover 3 days later, alone in his editing room, when he played back the recording and saw his dead wife blink. 3 days after burying Emma, Nathan hadn't slept, hadn't showered, hadn't eaten anything more substantial than cold coffee and stale crackers. His editing room had become a tomb of its own, windows covered with blackout curtains, the only light coming from 3 monitors displaying hours of funeral footage. He had watched the recordings at least 20 times, searching for something he couldn't name, a sign, a message, proof that Emma had known he was there, that she had heard him whisper goodbye. The apartment felt wrong without her. Every corner held memories that stabbed at him like broken glass. The kitchen where she danced while cooking pasta. The couch where they binged Netflix shows until 3 in the morning. The bathroom where her toothbrush still sat in the holder, dried and abandoned. He couldn't look at any of it, so he stayed in the editing room, lost in footage, rewinding and replaying moments that were already slipping away from him. Sarah had called 16 times. He hadn't answered. She would want him to process his grief, or seek help, or some other therapeutic bullshit that people said when they had never lost the only person who made their existence bearable. What was there to process? Emma was dead. The world kept spinning. He kept breathing. That was the horror of it. Life just continued, indifferent and cruel, as if nothing had changed. On the 3rd night, Nathan decided to organize the footage chronologically. It was pointless busy work, but it gave his hands something to do besides shake. He imported everything into his editing software. 4 hours and 17 minutes of material, spanning from the chapel service to the final shovelful of dirt. He began scrubbing through the timeline, marking sections, adding metadata, chapel entrance, eulogy, coffin procession, graveside. His eyes burned from staring at screens, but he couldn't stop. This was all he had left of Emma's last day above ground. At 2:43 in the morning, he reached the section filmed inside the chapel, the close-ups of Emma in the coffin. He had zoomed in tight on her face during Father Timothy's closing prayer, holding the shot for nearly 30 seconds before panning away. Nathan had already watched this part multiple times, but now, working at the frame level, he noticed something. A flicker, nothing dramatic, just a minor inconsistency in the image between frames. He backed up, played it again at quarter speed. There, frame 2847 to frame 2849. Something changed. His pulse quickened. He isolated those 3 frames, expanding them to fill the entire center monitor. Frame 2, 847. Emma's face, peaceful, eyes closed. Frame 2, 848. Nearly identical. Frame 2, 849. Her left eyelid was slightly more open. Nathan's breath caught. He stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. It had to be a compression artifact. Digital video was full of glitches. Pixels that shifted, colors that bled, images that warped during encoding. He had worked with footage for 20 years. He knew all the technical quirks, but this didn't look like a glitch. He zoomed in further, enhancing the image until Emma's eye filled the entire screen. The difference between frames was subtle, but undeniable. Her eyelid had moved, opened slightly, then closed again. A blink. Nathan's hands began to tremble violently. He played the 3 frames again, and again, and again. Each time the same impossible movement. His wife, lying dead in a coffin, had blinked. No, that was insane. She was dead. Dr. Grant had pronounced her dead at the hospital. The mortician had embalmed her. She had been dead for 4 days by the time of the funeral. Dead people don't blink. Dead people don't move. This had to be an error, a trick of light, a camera malfunction, something rational and explainable. But what if it wasn't? The thought invaded his mind like poison, spreading through every synapse, destroying his ability to think clearly. What if Emma had been alive? What if she had been conscious, trapped in her own body, unable to move or speak, and everyone, including him, had assumed she was dead? What if they had buried her alive? Nathan lurched away from the desk and vomited into a trash can, his body rejecting the possibility even as his mind spiraled into it. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But he had proof. 3 frames of digital video that showed his wife's eyelid moving inside her coffin. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and pulled up Dr. Grant's number. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he even say? That he had footage of his dead wife blinking? They would think he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. Maybe grief had finally broken something fundamental in his brain. and he was manufacturing evidence of the impossible because accepting Emma's death was too painful. Or maybe, whispered a dark voice in the back of his mind, maybe you buried your wife alive, and she died alone in the darkness, screaming your name while you stood above her grave in the rain. Nathan looked back at the screen, at frame 2849, at that partially open eyelid. He had to know, even if it destroyed him, even if it proved he was insane, even if it confirmed his worst nightmare, he had to know the truth. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. The 911 operator's voice was calm, professional, infuriatingly patient. Nathan tried to explain, stumbling over words that sounded insane even as they left his mouth. Footage, blink, coffin, alive. The operator asked if he was in immediate danger, asked if he had taken any medications, asked if there was someone who could come stay with him. She didn't believe him. Of course she didn't. Within 20 minutes, a patrol car arrived. Officer David Martinez stood in Nathan's editing room, arms crossed, studying the screens with the expression of someone humoring a mentally unstable person. Nathan played the 3 frames over and over, pointing desperately at the eyelid movement. Martinez watched politely, then shook his head. Mr. Harper, I understand you're grieving, but what you're showing me could be anything. A shadow, a compression error, the camera moving slightly. Nathan wanted to scream. Instead, he forced himself to speak calmly, rationally. I'm a professional filmmaker. I know what compression artifacts look like. This is different. This is movement, real movement. Martinez sighed. Your wife was pronounced dead by a licensed physician. She was embalmed. She was buried 3 days ago. I'm sorry for your loss, but you need to accept that she's gone. Accept. That word again. Everyone wanted him to accept, to move on, to let go. But how could he accept when he had evidence? How could he move on when Emma might have been alive? I need the body exhumed, Nathan said, his voice breaking. I need someone to check. Please. What if I'm right? What if she was alive and we buried her? Martinez's expression softened slightly, shifting from annoyance to pity. That's not something that can happen without a court order, and no judge is going to issue one based on a few frames of video that show practically nothing. You need to talk to someone, Mr. Harper, a therapist, a grief counselor. This obsession isn't healthy. After Martinez left, Nathan sat in the darkness staring at frame 2849. The blink, the impossible, undeniable blink. He wasn't crazy. He knew what he saw, but how could he make anyone else see it? He spent the next 6 hours researching, falling down rabbit holes of medical journals and conspiracy forums. That's when he found it. Lazarus syndrome. Named after the biblical figure who rose from the dead, it was a documented phenomenon where people declared dead suddenly showed signs of life, minutes or even hours after resuscitation attempts had stopped. The medical literature called it auto-resuscitation. There were dozens of cases. A woman in Colombia who woke up during her own funeral. A man in Poland who came back to life in a body bag. A premature baby in Argentina who started crying in the morgue. It was rare, but it happened. Nathan's hands shook as he read. What if Emma had experienced Lazarus syndrome? What if her heart had stopped, but then spontaneously restarted after Dr. Grant had pronounced her dead? What if she had been in a deep coma, mistaken for death, and no one had waited long enough to be sure? He pulled up Dr. Grant's records from the hospital. Emma had been declared dead at 6:42 in the morning. The attending physician had checked for pulse and respiration, found neither, and signed the death certificate. Standard procedure. But had he waited long enough? Had he checked thoroughly enough? Or had he been tired from a long night shift, too quick to make the call? Nathan grabbed his laptop and drafted an email to the Oregon Medical Board, attaching the video frames and citing Lazarus syndrome. He detailed everything: the timeline, the footage, the possibility of premature death declaration. His cursor hovered over the send button. If he did this, there was no going back. He would be accusing Dr. Grant of negligence. He would be opening an investigation. He would be branding himself as the crazy widower who couldn't accept reality. But what if Emma had been alive? What if she had woken up in that coffin, trapped in silk-lined darkness, unable to breathe, clawing at the lid while 6 feet of earth pressed down above her? What if she had died twice, once from her heart, once from his failure to save her? Nathan closed his eyes, saw Emma's face in the coffin, saw that eyelid flutter. He clicked send. The investigation began the next morning, and with it, Nathan's descent into a nightmare that would prove some truths are more unbearable than death itself. The Oregon Medical Board responded within 48 hours, but not in the way Nathan had hoped. Dr. Richard Pemberton, the board's chief investigator, arrived at Nathan's apartment with a forensic video analyst named James Wu. They spent 3 hours examining the footage, running it through enhancement software, analyzing pixel patterns and compression algorithms. Nathan stood behind them, barely breathing, waiting for validation. When Wu finally turned around, his expression told Nathan everything. "Mr. Harper, what you're seeing is a combination of digital compression artifacts and parallax error. When you zoomed in during filming, the camera's autofocus system made micro adjustments. That's what created the appearance of movement in your wife's eyelid. I've replicated the effect in the lab. It's a known phenomenon in post-mortem videography." Nathan felt the room tilt. "That's not possible. I know what I saw." Pemberton placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Harper, Dr. Grant followed all proper protocols. Your wife showed no vital signs for 17 minutes before he pronounced her dead. There was no pulse, no respiration, no electrical activity in her heart. I've reviewed the medical records personally. There's no indication of error or negligence." 17 minutes. The words echoed in Nathan's mind. Lazarus syndrome cases typically involved spontaneous resuscitation within 10 minutes. But what if Emma had been the exception? What if her heart had restarted at 18 minutes after everyone had stopped looking? "I want an exhumation," Nathan said, his voice hollow. "That's the only way to know for certain." Pemberton exchanged a glance with Wu. "Mr. Harper, I understand this is difficult, but exhumation requires substantial evidence of wrongful death. A few ambiguous frames of video don't meet that threshold. More importantly, your wife was embalmed. Even if there had been any sign of life after burial, which is medically impossible given the embalming process, there would be no way to detect it now. The embalming fluids would have obscured any evidence." Nathan's legs gave out. He sank into his desk chair, staring at the monitors. "So you're telling me there's no way to ever know? I'm telling you that your wife received proper medical care and she's at rest now. What you need is closure, not an investigation." After they left, Nathan sat in silence for hours. The word closure felt like an obscenity. How could there be closure when doubt infected every thought? He pulled up the footage again. Those 3 frames that had started everything. Maybe Wu was right. Maybe it was just a technical glitch, his grief-addled brain seeing meaning in meaningless pixels. Or maybe everyone was lying to him. Maybe there had been a mistake, a cover-up, and they were all protecting Dr. Grant from a malpractice lawsuit. Maybe Emma had died twice and the system was too invested in its own infallibility to admit the truth. Nathan didn't know which possibility was worse, that he was losing his mind, or that he was the only sane person in a world that had buried his wife alive. His phone rang. Sarah. He almost didn't answer, but guilt made him pick up. "Nathan, I heard about the medical board investigation." Her voice was tight with anger. "What the hell are you doing?" "I saw something in the footage, Sarah." Emma moved. She blinked. "She was dead, Nathan. Dead. And you're dragging her through this nightmare because you can't accept it." Sarah's voice cracked. "I lost my sister, my only sister, and instead of grieving with me, you're turning her death into some conspiracy theory. You're making her a spectacle." Nathan wanted to explain, but the words tangled in his throat. How could he make her understand when he barely understood himself? "I just need to know," he whispered. "Know what? That you were right? That everyone else was wrong? What happens when you finally get your exhumation and they open that coffin and she's been dead the whole time? What happens to you then?" Silence stretched between them. "I can't watch you destroy yourself," Sarah finally said. "And I can't let you destroy Emma's memory. Stay away from the cemetery, Nathan. Stay away from me. If you keep pushing this, I'll get a restraining order." She hung up. Nathan stared at his reflection in the black monitor screen. He looked like a ghost. Hollow-eyed, unshaven, barely human. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe he was destroying himself, but he couldn't stop. Because late at night, in the space between sleep and waking, he could hear Emma screaming his name from beneath 6 feet of earth, and that sound would haunt him until he knew the truth, whatever the cost. Nathan hired a lawyer. Nathan. Marcus Chen was a bulldog of a man who specialized in medical malpractice, with a reputation for taking impossible cases and winning them through sheer tenacity. He listened to Nathan's story without judgment, watched the footage without dismissing it, and then delivered his assessment with brutal honesty. "The video isn't enough. No judge will grant an exhumation order based on what could reasonably be explained as a technical anomaly. But there might be another angle. Marcus had pulled Dr. Grant's professional history. 3 years ago, there had been a complaint filed against him by the family of an elderly patient who had been pronounced dead, but showed signs of life 20 minutes later in the morgue. The complaint had been dismissed, attributed to post-mortem muscle spasms, but it established a pattern. If we can demonstrate that Dr. Grant has a history of premature death declarations, we might have grounds for further investigation. But Nathan, you need to understand something. Even if we win, even if we get that exhumation order, you might not like what we find. Nathan knew. He had spent sleepless nights imagining both possibilities. Emma, perfectly preserved, unmistakably dead for weeks. Or Emma, her face frozen in an expression of terror, fingernails broken from clawing at the coffin lid. He didn't know which outcome would destroy him more. Marcus filed a civil petition for exhumation, citing possible medical negligence and requesting an independent autopsy. The news spread quickly. Local media picked up the story. Grieving widower claims wife buried alive. And suddenly, Nathan's private hell became public entertainment. Reporters camped outside his apartment. His phone exploded with calls from tabloids offering money for exclusive interviews. Online forums dissected the footage frame by frame, split between those who believed him and those who called him delusional. The attention was suffocating, but it had one unexpected benefit. Father Timothy reached out. They met at a small diner on the outskirts of Portland, away from cameras and curious eyes. The priest looked older than Nathan remembered, burdened by something heavy. "I need to tell you something," Timothy said, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long gone cold. "Something I heard during Emma's funeral that I've been trying to convince myself was imagination." Nathan's heart stopped. During the eulogy, when everyone was praying, I heard a sound, very faint. It came from the direction of the coffin, a kind of muffled thump. Timothy's eyes were haunted. I told myself it was the building settling or someone shifting in their seat, but it bothered me. It bothered me enough that I almost stopped the service. But then it didn't happen again, and I thought I was being foolish. After all, she was dead. The doctors had confirmed it. Nathan couldn't breathe. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was afraid of looking like a fool. Because I trusted the medical professionals. Because I didn't want to cause the family more pain." Timothy's voice broke. "But if I was wrong, if Emma was alive and I did nothing, then I failed in the most fundamental way a priest can fail. I didn't protect someone who needed help." Nathan's hands shook. Timothy's testimony changed everything. It wasn't just ambiguous video footage anymore. It was corroboration from a credible witness. Someone else had heard something wrong, something impossible. Marcus immediately amended the petition, including Father Timothy's statement. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Morrison, agreed to hear arguments. The courtroom filled with spectators, journalists, and Emma's family. Sarah sat in the front row, her face a mask of fury and pain. When Nathan took the stand, he told his story clearly, methodically, showing the footage and explaining frame by frame what he had discovered. The prosecution's attorney, representing the medical board and Dr. Grant's interests, systematically dismantled his claims, bringing in expert after expert to explain compression artifacts, post-mortem phenomena, and the impossibility of Lazarus syndrome occurring after embalming. But when Father Timothy testified, the room went silent. His account was simple, sincere, and devastating. Judge Morrison called a recess. Nathan sat in the hallway, staring at his hands, feeling the weight of 11 days pressing down on him. 11 days since Emma had been buried. If she had been alive, she was certainly dead now. But he had to know. He had to see. The judge returned with her decision, and Nathan's entire world hung on her next words. Judge Morrison granted the exhumation. The cemetery at dawn was cold and gray, fog rolling between headstones like ghosts. Nathan stood behind police barricades with Marcus, Sarah, Father Timothy, and a crowd of media. Dr. Grant was there too, flanked by lawyers, his face pale and drawn. A forensic team and medical examiner prepared to supervise. The backhoe's engine roared to life, mechanical and indifferent. Nathan raised his camera. Even now, especially now, he needed the lens between himself and reality. The excavation took 40 minutes, dirt piled beside the grave in a dark mound. When the coffin was finally exposed, workers carefully lifted it from the earth and placed it on a platform. The medical examiner, Dr. Patricia Reynolds, approached with her team. Nathan's camera captured everything. The coffin's tarnished brass handles, the mud caking its surface. Sarah's hand covering her mouth. This was the moment. The answer to every sleepless night, every obsessive replay of those 3 frames, every nightmare of Emma screaming in darkness. Dr. Reynolds unsealed the coffin. The lid opened with a sound like a sigh. Nathan's camera recorded what came next, though later he would delete the footage, unable to bear watching it even once. Emma lay exactly as she had been buried. The blue sundress, the white rose, the peaceful arrangement of her hands. But her face was wrong. Her expression wasn't peaceful anymore. Her mouth was open in what could have been a scream, and her hands, previously folded, were now pressed against the coffin's lid, fingers bent at unnatural angles. Dr. Reynolds worked quickly, examining the body, photographing evidence. When she turned to address the gathered crowd, her expression was grim. Based on the position of the body, damage to the fingernails and fabric fibers beneath the nails matching the coffin's interior lining, I can confirm that the deceased showed signs of consciousness after burial. Preliminary findings suggest death occurred from asphyxiation, not cardiac arrest. The words detonated like bombs. Nathan's camera fell from his hands. He heard screaming, Sarah maybe, or himself, but it sounded distant, underwater. Dr. Grant collapsed. Father Timothy fell to his knees, praying. Marcus was shouting about liability, about justice, but what did any of that matter? Emma had woken up. She had been alive. She had known she was buried. She had tried to escape, scratching at the lid while he slept in their bed 11 days away, while the world continued spinning, while everyone insisted she was dead. Nathan had been right. The blink had been real. Emma had tried to signal, to warn them, and no one had listened. And now she was dead, truly, finally dead. Not from a defective heart, but from suffocating in a coffin he had helped lower into the ground. He was the last person she thought of as the oxygen ran out. His name was the last word she tried to scream. The investigation that followed destroyed Dr. Grant's career. New protocols were implemented nationwide for death verification. Nathan received a settlement that felt like blood money. Sarah never spoke to him again. The media called him a hero for exposing a fatal flaw in the medical system. But Nathan knew the truth. He had filmed his wife's funeral, caught evidence that she was alive, and still reached her too late. Every night he sat in his editing room, staring at frame 2849, the blink, the moment Emma tried to tell him she needed help. And every night he heard her voice in the darkness asking the question that would haunt him forever. Why didn't you save me?